Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 21 on Henry and his ministers. And this video, ladies and gentlemen, finally we have arrived. We've come to the fall of Thomas Cromwell. Now, Cromwell, for more than a decade, Cromwell had been working for King Henry VIII, and he'd had a huge number of successes. Let's have a quick recap. He was involved in the successful annulment of the marriage to Catherine of Aragon. He arranged the marriage to Anne Boleyn when necessary. Prompted by Henry, he arranged the removal of Anne Boleyn. He arranged the marriage to Jane Seymour. He increased Henry's power, made for more efficient rule in Ireland and Wales. Cromwell had helped to reform crime, justice. He'd reformed the finances and Parliament, and as we've seen recently, he arranged the marriage of Anne of Cleves. So, from Henry's perspective, Cromwell has done a good job. The reward for Cromwell? April 1540, Cromwell became Earl of Essex. He'd arrived right at the top. Remember his very lowly origins. So, great news for Cromwell. April, he is the Earl of Essex. But by June, Cromwell had been arrested and put in the Tower of London. And by July, ladies and gentlemen, Cromwell had been executed. Well, what's happened here? Let's quickly run through the series of events. 10th of June, 1540, Cromwell is arrested, put in the Tower of London, where he is questioned by the Duke of Norfolk. And he is accused of a whole list of potentially very, very serious crimes. Number 1, heresy, following a different religion to the religious beliefs of King Henry. Number 2, apparently Cromwell was planning to marry Henry's eldest daughter, the Catholic Mary Tudor. Cromwell was accused of not enforcing the 6 Articles, a new Act of Parliament aimed at bringing England slightly back more towards the Catholic religion. And finally, he was accused of treason, trying to make himself as powerful as Henry. Now, they are serious accusations, ladies and gentlemen. Cromwell's enemies were very aware that, of course, he's a very skilled lawyer. They feared his skills of persuasion, so therefore there was no trial. Instead, Cromwell's enemies used the very same mechanism that Cromwell had introduced to Parliament to crush some of his own enemies, called the Bill of Attainder to Parliament. There was no chance for Cromwell to speak and defend himself. It was just a straightforward vote. Is Cromwell guilty or not guilty? This was a clever move. Unfortunately for Cromwell, the people in Parliament voted guilty. Cromwell sent a very famous letter to Henry, and in that letter where he's writing to try and save his life, very famous sentence: "Most gracious Prince, I cry for mercy, mercy, mercy." But no, there was no mercy shown by Henry VIII. There was no reprieve. 28th of July 1540, Cromwell was executed. Wow. So that's what happened. But for us, of course, we need to try and understand why. Why did this happen? How can we explain this seemingly surprising and strange turn of events? Why was Cromwell executed? As ever, ladies and gentlemen, there are many factors, many reasons. I've tried to narrow them down to 6. To try and help you remember them, I've created a little mnemonic or word to try and help us remember the 6 reasons why in the end Cromwell was executed. And the word for the fall of Cromwell is Axeman. The Axeman, the executioner. Let's have a look at them. Ambition, X factor of religion, enemies, a moody King Henry, Anne of Cleves, and Norfolk, the Duke of Norfolk. Axeman. If you remember that, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you'll remember some of the reasons why Cromwell was executed if they asked you that in the exam. Well, let's have a look at the first one. A for ambition. What's that all about? Cromwell's enemies claimed that Cromwell himself was very, very ambitious. He wanted to make himself equal to Henry. They claimed that Cromwell was trying to arrange for the marriage of himself to Henry's daughter, Mary Tudor. Now that is probably nowhere near true, ladies and gentlemen. For a start, Mary was a very devout and strong Catholic, and Cromwell was a very strong Protestant. So it's unlikely that a marriage would ever be arranged successfully between the two of them. So it's false. But the claim was still damaging to Cromwell, especially when it's linked to other events. So the enemies of Cromwell were using his ambition against him to try and get into Henry's ear and persuade him that his chief minister was too powerful. That's the first reason, the first step to persuade Henry to execute his chief minister. Then, of course, we have X factor, religion. We live in a time where maybe religion is not quite as important to as many people as it was back then in the 1500s. Religion was very important in England at that time. King Henry, of course, he'd been a very, very devout and strong Catholic. He'd moved slightly towards being a Protestant, mainly to try and get his marriage to Catherine of Aragon annulled, because if you remember, the Pope, the leader of the Catholic Church, would not agree. But Henry, like most people at that time, had a strong belief in heaven, hell, and many people, including Henry, feared what would happen to them when they died. Would their fate be that they would burn for eternity in hell? That was a strong belief at the time. So Henry didn't want to move further towards a Protestant country. Instead, as he got older, he decides to move back towards being the Catholic religion again. And an Act of Parliament was passed called the Act of 6 Articles to do this. I'll mention that more in a later video. Cromwell's enemies use this. They can say again, whispering in Henry's ears, "Aha! King Henry, Cromwell is going against you. He's going against the 6 Articles. He's not helping England return to the Catholic religion, which is what you want, King. Cromwell is challenging your power. He's challenging your decision." This made Henry very annoyed, because it was risking Henry's own soul, remember, in his head. So Henry's feelings are building against Cromwell. Ambition and religion. Now, I've already mentioned quite a bit about Cromwell's enemies. Cromwell had been at the top for many, many years. He had made many enemies. It was inevitable. In church, over religion, some people hated what he had done, what Cromwell had done to the monasteries, the dissolution of the monasteries. A video on that is coming very soon. But they hated his actions. They hated what he had done, so they became his enemies. Cromwell did attempt to reform the church, and did attempt to move England to being a more Protestant country. For example, some important Catholics, Bishop John Fisher, Sir Thomas More, were executed. So Cromwell has enemies because of religion. He also has enemies because of the foreign policy that he was involved in. The French Catholics hated Cromwell. A feeling emerges that if Cromwell is removed, maybe there could be better relations between England and France. And maybe Henry's beginning to think about this himself. So again, the feelings against Cromwell seem to be building. Now, King Henry, he's obviously right at the centre of the decision. He's going to make the decision, if necessary, to arrest Cromwell and execute him. Henry was becoming a bit more irrational, very, very moody. His personality was changing. He was a very grumpy, middle-aged man by now. 1536, he had fallen from a horse, and the horse had landed on him and had left him with a very bad and a very painful leg. It was ulcerous, he was overweight, he now had very, very extreme mood swings. He was very quick to change his mood and become very, very annoyed and very, very angry. Cromwell's enemies could use this by whispering in his ear, "Oh, Cromwell is being disloyal to you, King Henry." Henry was quick to anger. So maybe that played a part in Henry's decision, finally, to turn his back on his chief minister, Thomas Cromwell. And also a very important one. From our previous video, we know how Thomas Cromwell was so involved in arranging the marriage of Henry to Anne of Cleves. As we saw in the last video, the marriage was over very, very quickly. If you remember King Henry shouting at Cromwell, "I like her not, I like her not." Cromwell and the marriage of Anne of Cleves, it's an open goal for Cromwell's enemies. They can use that again to blame Cromwell. Henry's angry because it looks as if he's been humiliated. A bad decision has been made. He's angry. He wants someone to blame. Just at the time that Cromwell's enemies are blaming him. And the final one. Again, I've mentioned the word enemies. The Duke of Norfolk. He's hugely important. He becomes Cromwell's number one enemy, if you like. Now, why would the Duke of Norfolk so dislike Thomas Cromwell? Well, there's many reasons. He had many reasons to dislike Cromwell. First off, Cromwell, of course, if you remember, was from very low origins. His father was basically a ruffian from Putney, not a particularly nice part of London at the time. The Duke of Norfolk, a noble, he's of the old-fashioned view that nobles should advise the king, not some person who's just from a very poor background like Cromwell. Norfolk was a Catholic. Cromwell is pushing forward the Protestant religion, so there's disagreement there. Norfolk was ambitious as well. He realised if he could somehow get Cromwell out of the way, that would be more power, more influence for himself, for Norfolk. Maybe he could become chief minister. He is the top noble. Cromwell also, I've hinted earlier, he's closing monasteries. One of the places that gets closed was Thetford Priory. Well, you think, so what? But Thetford Priory is where Norfolk's ancestors, his family, if you like, they were buried there. Norfolk had to arrange for their dead bodies, their bones, to be dug up and reburied. So he's got a personal hatred of Cromwell. Over many years, Norfolk had also argued with Cromwell about the influence of Wolsey. So it's almost like a lifetime of antagonism between Norfolk and Cromwell. Norfolk now can pounce. This is his time to act. Cromwell is weak because of the fallout of the failure of the marriage to Anne of Cleves. He can use rumours, he can use whispers to whisper in his ear. Norfolk's niece is a woman, a young, attractive woman called Catherine Howard. Well, Henry's roving eye has wandered once again, and he spotted Catherine Howard, and he thinks she's attractive. I think I might want to marry her. So all the cards are falling into place for the Duke of Norfolk. So he gets his niece, Catherine Howard, to whisper in King Henry's ear, "Oh, Cromwell, he's not sorting out the divorce to Anne of Cleves quickly enough." Cromwell is pushing Protestantism, according to Norfolk. Now, some of these claims were false, but so what? It didn't matter. Henry's moody, Henry's angry with Cromwell. The poison is being poured in Henry's ear against Cromwell. So when Cromwell writes the letter, "I cry for mercy, mercy, mercy," because of these reasons, ladies and gentlemen, King Henry will not grant him mercy, mercy, mercy. Instead, it's the Axeman. So, 28th of July, 1540, Cromwell's beheaded. On the very same day, King Henry married Catherine Howard, the niece of the Duke of Norfolk. Wow! Cromwell has gone, Norfolk has risen. So that's the fall of Cromwell. King Henry, he very, very quickly came to regret the death of Cromwell. He realised, too late for Cromwell, all of the good work that Cromwell had done. He realised that some of the whispers, the rumours that had been put into his ear were false. But of course, by then it was too late. All King Henry could do is refuse to appoint the Duke of Norfolk as Chief Minister, and he never became the Chief Minister. So this video brings us to the end of the second part of the course. The third and the final part, starting with the next video, is looking more at religion and the Reformation. Until then, as ever, I hope this has been useful. All the best. See you soon. Bye now.